Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, I'm Angie. I'm a 19-year-old speech and language therapy student going into my second year of university. I literally cannot even believe it. And today's video is hopefully going to serve as the ultimate guide to freshers in first year from your online big sis, aka me. So grab a drink, grab a snack, get comfy, because this one is going to be a long one. If you're looking for any specific pieces of information, I'm going to have it all linked in the timestamps. But if you're just looking for general uni advice, then look no further. I'm going to cover everything from starting uni and freshers week, making friends, time management and routine, study tips specific to SLT, living alone and adulting, general uni advice, taking care of yourself and your mental health, and then also my final thoughts and encouragement. So there's a lot to cover. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So you've packed up the car, you've driven down to uni, you've unpacked, you've said goodbye to mum and dad or whoever else came to drop you, and now you're on your own. Freshers week has begun. Freshers week is the first week or 2 weeks after you move in, and it's full of events and fairs and loads of freebies. Yes. So Freshers Week is such an exciting time, but that it can be a little bit overwhelming and there is a lot of information to take in. So here are some tips that I have thought about that were either really helpful or things I wish I did. First one is saying yes to invites. Don't feel pressured to attend everything because freshers will be full of invites from pre's to coffee meetups, but say yes whether you're curious or just up for it. And also remember that it's okay to say no. It's okay to skip an event, to recharge, reset, or just do your own thing, because Freshers Week is your week. So I'd say the next thing would be to set a loose budget for Freshers Week before it begins, and try not to overspend on that budget if you can help it. Freshers Week can be really expensive sometimes, with nights out, takeaways, Ubers, society fees, the lot. Try and decide on a rough budget before the week begins and take out cash if you can help it. It's also quite helpful when you're budgeting for Freshers Week if you know roughly what societies you're thinking of joining. I would say put aside some money for society fees, just because some society fees can be a little bit more expensive than others, especially sports societies. So making sure that you have some money put aside for that as part of your Freshers Week budget is really important. So the next thing I would say is to avoid peer pressure. Now, it sounds easier said than done, but Freshers Week is full of hype and you do not have to drink or to party or to stay out late in order to fit in. Do what feels comfortable for you, and don't feel weird if you feel like you're embracing the more chill side of freshers, or perhaps doing things that not everyone else is doing, because Freshers Week, like I said, Freshers Week is your week, which means you are free to do whatever you want. If you're wondering what it might be like having a little bit more of a chill Freshers Week, then I will link my Freshers Week vlog in the cards, and you can have a little bit of a peek, a little bit of an insight into how I spent my Freshers Week, which was a combination of chill and events, but not necessarily like student union events. I went to, I think, 2 student union events, but I went to quite a few of the Christian union events because I'm a Christian, and so that was something that I knew I wanted to join straight away. And so it's really down to you, like what societies you join and what events you partake in is all completely up to you. So don't feel like you're missing out on anything just because you're not going to student union every single night. My next piece of advice, it's more of just setting an expectation really, but expect for every conversation during freshers to begin with questions like, what's your name? Where are you from? What are you studying? Because this is how you get to know people and to find some common ground. And now it will get boring as the week goes on, and I can completely understand that, but knowing, you know, if there are people, like where are you from means that you can hear if people are from your area or from nearby where you live, and then what course you on helps you to find your course mates if you don't know any of them before you start, and just finding common ground to talk about with people, because those mundane questions will serve as conversation starters, but they will also mean that when you found something to talk about, you don't have to talk about the mundane stuff anymore, because for example, if someone said, oh, I'm studying speech and language therapy, and I go, oh, there's no other speech and language therapy students that I know, and then strike up a conversation about, you know, what inspired you to study that course, or how do you find living in XYZ area? Do you get what I'm saying? The questions themselves will be mundane, but there are ways that you can make them exciting conversation starters, and that you can ask a little bit more unique questions. So the next one I would say is to stock a freshers survival kit. Now, hear me when I say this, you will get freshers flu. 99% of people get freshers flu. I was quite lucky. I fended off freshers flu for quite a while and then got it the week before I was supposed to go away somewhere, which was really disappointing. I was fine by the time I went away, but it took like 2 days of bed rest and I missed a couple lectures because I was so unwell. And so stock a freshers survival kit. Include painkillers, vitamins, snacks, and mini first aid kits, and that sort of stuff, so that when you do get ill with freshers flu, you don't have to stock things like painkillers, Lemsip, night nurse, anything that can help you, cough sweets, that sort of stuff, and then vitamins, water, first aid, so that you don't have to go hunting for those things if and when you do come down with freshers flu, because freshers flu is real, it's very real, and almost everyone gets it. So yeah. And then on the kind of same vein as that, don't neglect your practical admin during Freshers Week. So I know Freshers Week is supposed to be fun, exciting, but don't forget that you've also got to do things like collect your student ID, register with a GP, check your timetable, get your Wi-Fi, all of that good stuff. So don't neglect doing your admin stuff during freshers, because that will be equally as important as all the fun that you're having and all the friends that you're making. So yeah. My next set of tips are going to be about settling in and getting to know the campus and the wider area that your university is based in. And so obviously this pertains more to campus universities, and if you go to a city university, feel free to adapt this advice, because exploring the city will be in turn kind of exploring the uni. But especially if you go to a campus university, this information is for you. So first and foremost, take solo walks around the area. Head out on your own, even if it's just a loop around campus, or perhaps a walk around the lake, or like a nature path, that sort of thing, as it'll help you build confidence and help you get your bearings and find your surroundings faster. And an added bonus, it will give you a little bit of a break from the constant socializing, especially if you go by yourself. The second thing I would say is locate the essentials early. In between events, find time to find the following places: the supermarket, the library, where you're going to be doing your laundry, the health centre, the hospital, the pharmacy, and the bank. Those are the 7 most important places I think you would need to locate, because a lot of those things you would need to locate in kind of a jiffy as opposed to like at a specific time. So know where these are, save space for later, especially if you're sick, tired, or running out of clean socks, because believe me, I ran out of clean socks in like the first 2 weeks of uni. So the last tip I have about settling in and getting to know the wider area would be to download campus maps and transport apps. I know that rhymes. She's a poet and she didn't even know it. Campus can be very, very confusing at first, and even more so confusing, I think, if you're in a city university. But downloading local transport apps and a campus map will be really helpful, so that you can plan your routes, check your bus times, and avoid getting lost on your first day of lectures. Because the last thing you want is to not have seen or know where your lectures are, and then be running around at 9 AM on a Monday morning trying to find where your lectures are and getting a little bit lost. So if you can help it, try and find where your lectures are. Usually you'll have a main location or a main couple of locations. Find that place before you start your lectures. It will save you a world of stress, I promise. So the next couple of tips are going to be pertaining to starting your actual degree. So you can kind of expect a slower academic start. At the start, you'll have lectures and seminars after Freshers Week, but the first couple of weeks are usually quite light on assignments and coursework. So use that time to sort out your reading list, buy your essentials, catch up on admin, and get organised before the real work begins to kick in. I quite use this time to kind of work out the main things on my reading list and how I could access them, to work out the portal, which is kind of going into the next bit. But yeah, so catch up on all that admin and make sure that you're all good and all settled, and ask any questions you have before you start. So my next one would be to get to know the course portal and your main course contacts. So familiarize yourself with your course's online portal, especially where to find your timetables, assignments, resources, updates, and where to hand things in. That last one is really, really important because sometimes that's a little bit tricky. Like, for example, Turnitin doesn't work on my Safari for whatever reason, so I had to then download Chrome and use Turnitin only on Chrome. It will save you a headache if you know how to use it before you start. And then also note down key things like your academic tutors email, your course reps, your module conveners, and your lecturers. And then also, especially for lecturers, things like office hours, note those down. They'll be really important in case you need help later. So then the next one I would say is to be organized from day one. Set up a simple system for your lecture notes, whether that's Notion, whether that's GoodNotes. Those are the two that I use mainly, but Google Docs, Google Drive, Word, anything like that. Use whatever you want to take your notes, but make sure that you have an organized system, whether it's having like folders or subpages in Notion, for example, for your modules. Organizing it in terms of week is what I did personally. I'll insert a little picture here of the top of my psychology page, and you'll see that it's organized by week in the semester, just so I can find things a little bit easier. Use folders, use color coding, anything you need, but it will make finding things for revision a lot easier when deadlines hit. So finding things for revision and then also for assignments. If you have to go back and look for lecture notes, it's going to be a little bit tricky if you don't know where you've saved your lecture notes. So having a specific place for each module, and then I would say each semester within the module or term, depending on how your uni does it, will be really, really helpful in the long run. And then my last kind of couple of tips are just general like tips for your first few weeks at uni. So yeah, don't stress if you're not loving it just yet. Despite the hype, you might not feel like you're having the best time of your life the second that you step foot on university campus, and that is okay. Not everyone finds everything that makes uni the best experience in the first day. So give yourself time and remember that what you're experiencing is completely normal. And then stay in touch with home. Calling home can be really, really comforting, especially in the early days, but don't rely on it to help your homesickness, because it will probably make it worse if you're ringing every single time you feel homesick. Give yourself the space to settle, explore, and gain a little bit of independence as you head off to uni. So those are all my tips on starting uni. So now the next tips I want to talk about are all about making friends and your social life. So let's get into it. So with making friends, I'm going to say this from the jump, is that I think that there are 4 pools of people that you can make friends from. You can make friends with your flatmates, which are pool 1. Pool 2 are your coursemates. Pool 3 are your society friends, and then pool 4 is anybody else. And so knowing that you can dip into each of these pools to make friends, and it's okay to have varying friendship groups, etc., etc., is really, really important. So my first section of advice is going to be about getting to know your flatmates and your coursemates. Number 1, knock and say hi once you've moved in. Introducing yourself in the first couple of days can make things a little bit less awkward later. Even just knocking and saying, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm in flat number so-and-so, can break the ice and set the tone for a friendlier flat. Personally, I left out donuts and bought sunflowers as a thing to be a little bit welcoming. And then second thing would be share the simple things. I don't mean sharing as in share your food, I mean bonding with your flat. It doesn't have to be big. A casual tea, a group chat, and a movie night can go a long way in terms of building friendships and connections. Number 3 would be to get to know your coursemates. Now, this will depend entirely on the scale of your course as to how feasible this is, but getting to know at least a few familiar faces will give you some people to sit with during lectures and also potentially to study with later down the line. Group projects, which you will probably have at some point, are also really helpful in terms of getting to know a new set of people. And then my 4th thing would be to be patient with friendships and don't write anybody off. Not every friendship clicks instantly. Give things some time, and some of your closest friends might come weeks or months into uni, which is kind of like a little bit of a scary thing to say, but it is the truth, is that not every single friendship you have will blossom the second you meet that person, and that's okay. So don't write anyone off in the first couple of weeks, because you never know who you might find. My next pieces of advice pertain to societies and clubs. Try societies before committing to them is my first piece of advice. It's totally okay to test out different societies and clubs before picking your favorites. Big societies, especially the really popular ones or the sports and dance ones, can sometimes feel quite overwhelming. So don't overlook the small cozy societies that might have a more relaxed or friendly vibe than the big societies. The next tip I have is volunteering or doing student media. If you find that club nights aren't really your thing, maybe look into doing things like the student radio, the student newspaper, or volunteering projects, as they can also be a really great way to meet like-minded people. Then a couple tips on just other ways to make friends. So first thing would be to make your everyday spaces social. So you don't have to go to events every single time you want to meet someone. Chat in the shared kitchen, say hi at the gym, and talk to people in your laundry room, because that still counts as fostering connections. And then also be friendly in your familiar spots. Something as simple as smiling or chatting with the same person at your regular cafe or library can spark a friendship, and you never know who you might find by just being kind and striking up a conversation. The next thing I want to talk about is dealing with loneliness and lack of friends, because that is completely normal, especially at the very start of uni. It is normal to feel that way. And so my first thing would be to say you are not the only person that feels lonely. It might seem like everyone else has it figured out, but loads and loads of students feel isolated. They just don't always show it. And I think that is both a good thing and a bad thing. I think that people being not very vulnerable means that you feel like you're on your own, when in fact you're not. You're just not in a space where people are feeling like they can share how they're feeling. So do not worry about it at all. And then also do things that you genuinely enjoy, which kind of links back to joining societies, because chasing friendships just to fit in will usually lead to shallow connections. But focusing on the things you like, joining the societies of topics that you enjoy, joining your course society, that sort of thing, will be so great in terms of finding people with similar vibes and similar interests to you. And then the third thing I want to say about dealing with loneliness is that well-being resources aren't just there for crisis. I'm probably going to say this a couple of times in the video, but well-being resources aren't just there for when you're struggling. They're not just there to fix things, they're also there to help you feel good and help you enjoy your uni experience, and that is really important. So if you are feeling lonely, speak to someone at your student well-being team. I know different unis call them different things, but speak to someone on your student well-being team who can have a chat with you, put you at ease, and make you feel a whole lot better about anything that you're feeling while you're at uni. And so my parting pieces of advice for making friendships will be this: be you, because friendships that last come from being genuine. You don't need to change your personality to fit in with other people, because the right people will love you just for being you, just for being your completely authentic, wonderful self, not like a shallow, inauthentic version of yourself, because it's quite hard to keep that up, to keep up this ideal of not who you are but who you're trying to be for other people. So don't do that. It's not worth it, to be honest with you, and it's not sustainable. And then the second thing is, it's okay if your circle changes. Uni is full of shifting dynamics. You're going to fight with people, you're going to make up with people, you're going to cut people off, you're going to include people back in your life. So don't worry about it. This goes for friendships no matter where you are in life. But if your friendship group looks different over time, that's okay, because that's part of the shifting dynamics of uni and the journey. And just remember that you don't just have to have one group of friends and that's the end of it. You can have multiple groups of friends The next tips are going to be on time management and routine, which is so important in uni, especially because there is just suddenly so much free time. I remember that my teachers in sixth form used to warn me about this. Not that I didn't believe them, but I didn't realise the extent of it until I got to uni and I realised that I had a lot of free time on my hands, especially things like sports afternoon, Wednesdays, which just meant that I did have like a free afternoon off, or like I'd have certain days off in a week. And so knowing what to do with that free time is really, really important. So let's get into the time management and routine section. Okay, so next, time management and routine. The first couple of tips are going to be about managing your workload when there's a little bit less structure than you're probably used to, especially if you've come straight from like college or sixth form, doing your A-levels, doing your BTEC, any kind of really structured, regimented routine. So the first thing I would say is to treat uni like a job. With less structure than school, it sometimes helps to block out specific hours for studying. If you treat it like you would a scheduled class or like a work shift, then you'll find that you're much better at getting things done in that time, knowing that that time is designated for work, and then any time outside of that can be leisure time. Well, not any, but time outside of that can be leisure time. And then the second thing I would say about managing your workload is to start your assignments early, even if it's just lightly. You might not have to write a full essay plan on day one of having your assignment, but even creating a rough outline will make things a little bit less stressful later. So I was given this software called AOO, which I use to mind map my thoughts on a specific essay and use that to kind of build my structure from there. So that's something that I like to do closer to when I have just received the assignment, especially if we've spoken about it in a lecture or a seminar, because it just makes it a little bit easier and more digestible. And then I can break down the items on the outline into smaller, manageable chunks. So the next thing is using planners and calendars. Using a planner or a digital tool such as Notion or Google Calendar to plan your week gives you a visual kind of look at what's going on. So this is like my weekly planner. So what I will do is I will plan on my Google Calendar, and I can give you a little walkthrough of that in a second. But yeah, so I plan on my Google Calendar, kind of time blocking, and then I will write on my glass planner that I just showed you any specific appointments or things that I need to remember. So for example, on here I have an appointment for an interview, and that was really important that I don't forget, but it will change from week to week. Some things will just be things like life group, or things like so-and-so and I have said they'll go for coffee. So making sure it's a visual way to stay on top of things. And so that just stays by my bed. So I see it when I come into my room, I see it when I'm leaving my room, and it kind of is a good reminder of the things that I have going on during the day. And then the next thing would be to color code your task categories. So mark different types of activities such as academic, social, or errands with different colors, as it will help you keep your week visually organized and easier to follow. And so on that note, I'll read you the categories I have of my Google Calendar, and then I'll show you a little bit later. So I have personal, which is anything that's not anything else. I have appointments, I have birthdays, careers and networking, chores and housework, content creation, Etsy and photography, faith and church, finances and admin, health and wellness, holidays and trips, in transit, miscellaneous, part-time work, podcast stuff, routines and research, self-care and me time, social life, societies and clubs, tasks, UGC work, and university. So like I said, I think I have like 20 calendars on my Google Calendar, and that is completely excessive. However, the principle remains the same. Once I've put each thing in each calendar, I can take a glance at my week and see what's going on just by the colours. So it's really, really helpful for me. And now might not work for everyone, might not work having that many calendars for you, and that's okay. But just having split calendars for things like academics, social, like things like errands and chores and stuff like that is a really, really great way to keep organized and have like a visual of your week. Ooh, I've gone into dark mode. All right. So now that that's sorted out, I've taken my computer back to this date so that you can see, you can have a little look-sees. But yeah, so this light color is any lectures I have, or any university related stuff. So if you see it goes under the calendar university. So I had lectures here. This was the library session I had in between because I didn't want to go back home. Then again, library here, so any library sessions, and then lectures and seminars were the things that are in this colour. And then I had some CU things to do. So this colour is societies and clubs, so I use it for any societies I'm part of. So this was for CU stuff. This was for CU stuff. And then this editing block here was for content creation. So that light yellow is for content creation. This colour is for faith and church. So anything that's related to church or to faith at all is in that section. And then this is social life, so going out at all, going to the cinema was what I did in those purple sections. I was serving at youth, so that went in the faith section. I had like well, this is me saying isn't a secret anymore, but this was my audition for the finish line when it did happen. So I will cover all that information. But yeah, so this was that little information slot. But if you can see, my Thursday was very, very free compared to the rest of my week. Wednesday and Thursday were relatively open. So I kind of filled Monday and Tuesday because there were things I needed to do and get done earlier on in the week. But yeah, so this is kind of how I structure a week in the life. But you can do it any way you want. Yeah, so as I said, I read all these before, but these are all the calendars that are part of my Google Calendar. So I just have a different colour for every single thing, just because it means that it makes life easier for me when I'm taking a glance at my calendar and seeing, oh, I've got this many lectures or this many seminars, etc, etc. So what I would do is I would put in my lectures first, and then put in my non-negotiables, and then put in any self-care time, like this is self-care time. So yeah, that would be what I would say is how I structure my week. This is how obviously I would recommend it, but obviously this isn't the same for everyone. Some people hate this sort of thing, so just find a way that works for you. So the next thing I want to talk about is setting a simple routine. So keeping a simple routine for eating and sleeping is really important. So you don't have to have a rigid schedule, but aim for regular meals and a decent sleep pattern to keep your brain and your body happy. Wind down before bed and keep somewhat good sleep habits. So personally, obviously having narcolepsy means that my sleep hygiene is really, really, really important. And so avoiding studying or scrolling before you go to bed, but instead building a 36 to 60 minute window where you can switch off and signal to your brain it's time to rest is super, super, super important. I definitely do fall asleep with my phone in my hand a lot, and it's not necessarily the healthiest, and so trying to avoid that is really, really important, especially for kind of building a regular sleep rhythm. At the moment I'm on summer, so my sleep rhythm is all over the place, but when I'm at uni I try and be in bed by between 11 and 11:30, and then sometimes I read a book. If I'm just really tired, I'll just go straight to bed. But just having those things that make my sleep quality a lot better is really, really important. So the next things I want to talk about is building balance. So don't make it all about work, because balance is actually really key. Make space for your hobbies, for socializing, and for doing absolutely nothing, because downtime is productive too. And then also say no when an invite encroaches on your protective time, which I'll come on to self-care a little bit later down. But I like to have protected times throughout the week that are specifically just for me. And so I've been doing solo date Saturdays, so I might go to the farmer's market, grab some fruit, or I might head to the cinema and catch like a morning viewing, because that view is like £2. Or maybe go for a stroll around the lake, just have a little bit of protected me time on a Saturday. And this might change depending on whether or not I get a part-time job coming up to September, because at the moment I didn't get a job going to uni, but I know several people who did, and they still had free time. They just had to manage their time a lot better. So I would say definitely weigh that up if that's something you want to do. But back to what I was saying is that if an invite encroaches on your protected time, don't feel pressured to say yes, because sometimes that protected time rearranging that protected time can throw off your entire week. And so if you want to, definitely rearrange your week if it's something that you really feel that you can't miss out on. But remember that it's okay to turn things down if they encroach on your protected time, don't align with your priorities, make it a little bit harder to get everything done in the week that you need to get done. That was something that I was a big victim of, was not saying no enough and setting that boundary that when I've said I'll do something, I should do it, and not using an invite from someone else as a way to procrastinate doing work or cleaning or that sort of thing. So definitely don't be like me, don't be like Angie, but instead know when it is okay to say no. And then the final thing I want to talk about is managing your study time effectively. I would say try Pomodoro or another similar study method, as it can help break down long library days and help them feel more manageable. And then the second thing is to break your work into small chunks. Big tasks can be quite overwhelming, so breaking them down into mini goals makes it more motivating and easier for you to start, but also easier for you to sustain doing a little bit of work every single day rather than a long block of work on the day before it's due. So yeah, those are my pieces of time management and routine advice. The next thing I'm going to talk about is studying and academic advice. So yeah, let's get into that section. Went for a little coffee break, but now we're back. So first things first, what to expect in your lectures and your seminars. So lectures are very information heavy, which means you're not actually meant to write every single thing down. Focus on the key points, especially if your lecturer mentions things that are not on the slides, and then review the slides or the recordings at a later time if they're available. And then seminars require a lot of participation, so do your best to prepare ahead of time. These are meant to be interactive, so come with a thought or a question ready. Even a quick skim of the topic helps and can start to turn the cogs in your mind about what sort of questions that you could be asking in the seminar. Pre-reading before both of these types of sessions will help feel more prepared, so doing some light reading before lectures and seminars will give you confidence and help you understand what's actually being said. I think that pre-reading can be work any way that you want it to work for you. For example, I like to skim read and just have a little bit of a think in my head about what topics, things that might come up, things that I might have to reference from earlier lectures or that sort of stuff. Whereas I have a friend who likes to write down the headings of the different slides so that she's not faffing around with that while the lecturer is talking, but then also she leaves like a little post-it note on the side of her computer that basically has any questions that she had, what slide that question pertains to, so that by the time it comes up she then will cross it off and write down the answer in her Word document. So definitely find a way that pre-reading works for you. I'm gonna go SLT for a second. Let's say that your lecture is on dysphagia, right? Reading on dysphagia, but also maybe listening to a podcast on treating dysphagia clients, or perhaps looking at a seminar, an online seminar or something of that sort about dysphagia can also be a great way to pre-read. You don't have to pre-read just the lecture slides and leave it at that. You can involve other mediums, which is we'll come on to that a little bit later. But yeah. The next thing is learning your studying and your note-taking style. So everyone studies differently and everyone takes notes differently, and finding that style for you while you're at uni is really key. I would say experiment with different study methods, try different ways of learning such as flashcards, mind maps, summarising out loud, and see what sticks. Because it will be trial and error at first unless you have developed these skills from A-level and you have a particular affinity to a certain way of making notes or of studying that you found worked really well for you at A-level. Then I would say it's less about trial and error and more about perfecting your craft and perfecting how you study. And studying is dynamic, so it means that the way you study in first year might not look exactly the same during second year. And then, as I was saying about looking at courses and things like that, use different mediums if that works for you. Not everything has to come directly from the lecture slides or textbooks. Podcasts, videos, online quizzes, courses, anything like that can also be really great ways to reinforce your learning in new ways. And then the final thing I have to say on studying and note-taking style is, again, not to compare too much. It's quite easy to feel behind when you see someone's pristine, colour-coded, beautiful calligraphy notes, but don't let that get you down. You can learn from others, sure, but don't copy them just because you feel it's working for someone else. Adapt the techniques to create a hybrid of techniques that work for you. So for me, I like to note take in Notion unless it's a phonetics seminar or a phonetics lecture or a medicine lecture. In those, because for example phonetics use some really funky symbols that I can't always get easily on my computer, and then medicine often has like diagrams and things that I would want to annotate, and so those are the two where I have my iPad in my lectures as well. So I might be annotating an image and then put it into my typed lecture notes for medicine, but that is the main way in which I take my notes in my lectures. I like to use Anki for studying. I like to use Quizlet occasionally. I like to have conversations with my course mates because, for example, SLT can be quite hands-on, especially with things like swallowing assessments, as well as standardized assessments for things like receptive language are very, very hands-on. And so having a conversation with my course mates or doing those assessments of my course mates are really, 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 really helpful, but that obviously will not apply to everyone. Having practical ways to study and practical ways to study with people are really, really important. The next thing I want to talk about is using academic resources. The Academic Skills Centre, and especially your department-specific academic liaison, is literally so important. Most unis will have services to help with department-specific questions, referencing, essays, and revision techniques. They are there to support you in your academic journey, not judge. And then second of all, using all the resources that your library has. So your library will definitely 100% offer more than just books. They will have quiet study zones, online access journals, group study rooms, workshops, talks, ways to improve things like an essay or your CV. And so just explore everything that there is on offer to you while you're at uni, because those skills will be invaluable later on, and they will also set the groundwork for a high level of work when you're studying for your degree. And then my last kind of study tips are kind of more general. Number one is to balance passive and active study. So reading is useful, but testing yourself, teaching a concept out loud, or doing practice questions can boost retention way more because it allows you to put those things into practice rather than just reading the theory. It's kind of like a driving test. Rather than just doing the theory and then getting on the road, what you want to do is do the theory, practice on the road, pass the practical test, and then get on the road. So in the same way, kind of balancing passive and active study is really important, because knowing the laws of the road is not the same as driving the laws of the road. Study groups can be really, really helpful. As I said, working with others to help you stay accountable, clear up confusions, and make revision feel a little bit less isolating. And also, if you have a practical hands-on degree, those are a good opportunity to practice. And then last but definitely not least is keeping your study space distraction free. A tidy desk equals a tidy mind, so clear away clutter and put your phone on do not disturb when you need to focus. Having your phone on do not disturb or having an app like Flora or Forest can be really, really helpful in terms of keeping focus, not getting distracted by social media and the notifications you're getting and 100 things going on at once in your phone. Next, we're going to talk about living alone and adulting, because that is one really, really significant part of being in uni. So let's jump straight into that section because I have a lot to say. So when you're at uni or living alone for the very, very first time, whether it's alone or alone with flatmates. Point is, when you get to uni, you're living away from home for the first time. And so these next couple tips are to help to make that as seamless and easy of a process as possible. Subtopic number one is getting along with your flatmates or your housemates, depending on where you live. Setting boundaries early, talking about cleaning, quiet hours and shared spaces with housemates early on will avoid bigger issues later, especially with cleaning and with guests and with quiet. Those are the really big ones that I think are really important to communicate and respect for other people. Along the same vein as setting boundaries is dealing with tension directly but calmly. If something's bothering you, bring it up before resentment builds. A respectful conversation will usually fix things faster than passive-aggressive post-it notes between two members of a flat that won't talk to each other. Kind of de-escalating before it gets to that point and dealing with the conflict as soon as it arises is really important in terms of maintaining a positive relative living space and enjoying the company of your flatmates and enjoying living where you are for the next 9 months. My next couple of tips are about food shop, meal planning and cooking. So, plan your meals for the week. Write out a simple meal plan before you shop, as it saves money, cuts down on waste and removes the daily "what am I eating" stress. I'm gonna also give a little walkthrough of my Notion template for my recipes and meal planning. So this is my Notion page for recipes and meal planning. So what I do is every single day I will put, let's say, I don't know, I'm having scrambled eggs for breakfast, chickpea stew for lunch and rice and stew for dinner. That's a lot of stew. But I might put in the notes, take chickpea stew for lunch on placement. And then I might say Tuesday, let's say I also have placement, but this time I'm going to buy lunch at Tesco. And then let's say Wednesday is life group day, which means don't have to cook dinner, and then I just put life group. So this note section is where I just put what would affect what I'm cooking, whether I'm cooking, etc, etc. This is obviously the day of the week, and this I can select what meals I have. So let's say I'm having Wednesday, I'm having lunch but no dinner, so I might take salad, might not even have breakfast, have dinner at my life group leaders, and then this is the meal cards that I've made so far. So some of them are more fleshed out than others. Some are my own recipe, so I've kind of not included like a recipe. Some are like recipes that I saw online. I've included the link to some of them, like the Marry Me chicken pasta. There's the specific link that I used, but then I also have a shorter version of the I have all the ingredients and then a shorter version of the steps. So yeah, so things like yogurt bowl is empty because yogurt bowl, I don't have a recipe for that. It's just something that I make. So having these meal cards, and so obviously again, this is not the way that everybody will like to plan their week. So obviously when I start a new week, I can, what happened to my button? So there's a button feature. I don't know what has happened to my button, no clue whatsoever, but there's a button that normally clears this, so that I don't have to go in and individually clear it. So I'm gonna have to create a new one. But yeah, and then I will, I have this, and then because I know that I've got, these are the ingredients, this is a lot of ingredients, and I normally have most of these at home, but let's say I have these ingredients for my salads, or copy and paste, and then take out anything that I don't need, so that I can formulate my shopping list, and then I can have an idea of how much I need of everything, of what I need, when I need it, like what day for, etc, etc, what stuff I can use from what I already have at home, all of that good stuff. So my next tip is to not shop on an empty stomach. You'll be surprised how enticing the bakery aisle sounds when your belly begins to growl. So before you know it, you'll have deviated from your list and instead have a basket or a trolley full of junk and sugar, which is not good for you. Obviously have those things in moderation, but don't shop on an empty stomach, because you'll be surprised how easily you'll deviate from the shopping list and that goes for online shopping too, in my opinion. So my next tip is something that you can definitely do before uni if you have the time, but if not, no worries. It's about learning to cook a few go-to meals. And again, ignore me if you love cooking new things all the time. So for me personally, I like a balance between go-to meals and new meals. So go-to meals would be things like pasta, noodles, etc, etc. Things that are really, really easy to cook, to prep and to keep in the fridge. but also I love cooking new things, and I have definitely cooked a wide variety of food and baked a variety of desserts since I've been at uni, just because I do genuinely enjoy cooking. So yeah, having 4 to 5 basic recipes gives you enough variety without the pressure of cooking something new every single day. So I would say include 1 to 2 meals per mealtime in your food prep. That way you're not wasting ingredients, you're not buying too much of anything, but you have got that balance between not eating the exact same meal every single night for 5 days, because that's something that I don't like doing. Sometimes I will have like a hyperfixation meal, and I'll have something that I love eating for like a specific amount of time, where I'll eat it like every lunch or every dinner for like a week or 2 weeks. But outside of that, I like to have a little bit of variety. So consider that when you're learning what you're cooking. Then the next thing I would say is to batch cook and freeze meals. Cooking once and eating twice is an absolute game changer, especially with things like chili. I think is probably the one thing that all uni students will recommend you batch cooking and freezing, because you can just use it for so many things. You can use it over rice, you can use it over pasta, you can use it for tacos, you can use it for shepherd's pie, you can use it for so many things. Just having things that you can batch cook and use in a variety of ways is also really helpful, because frozen leftovers can make easy meals when you're busy or when you're tired, especially if, like me, you have a subject where you have to go on placement. So the next thing is learning to budget. This was one big regret I have from first year, is not budgeting enough in terms of tracking where my spending was going and making sure that I'm not overspending in any category. And so yeah, I would say track your monthly spending for the first month or so of uni. Write everything that you spend down for a few weeks to give you a realistic view of where your money is going and where you can cut back. Along that same vein, use apps or technology to budget. Apps like Monzo and Emma, as well as budgeting spreadsheets, can make it really easy for you to stay in control of your finances without doing all the maths yourself. The final thing I want to talk about in this category is chores and cleaning and that sort of really boring adult stuff. When it comes to your own personal chores, I would say schedule in regular time to do these, such as laundry, dishes and cleaning. They can more easily pile up and make you feel a bit stressed, but if you're scheduling in regular time, whether it's daily, weekly, to do these tasks, then you can kind of prevent a little bit of overwhelm. Next thing for personal chores is do a short daily tidy up. So if you're a messy like me, maybe consider doing a daily 10-minute pickup to avoid scenario where things become overwhelming because they're piling up over time. What I like to do is play all too well 10-minute version, because I know at which point my time's starting to run out, which usually spurs me on to tidy a little bit faster. But yeah, so all too well 10-minute version, or another 10-minute song, or like a 10-minute loop on YouTube is a great way to like keep a timer and just kind of keep things like tidy. That would be my piece of advice. And then for communal chores, these are the two things I have. If you have communal chores, because not every flat will have communal chores, some flats will just expect you pick up after yourself, you tidy up after yourself, you clean up after yourself. Not that there's a specific set of chores allocated to each person, but that if you do have communal chores, make sure to split them fairly, either by making a rota or like a chore chart or something, so that everybody is pulling their weight, and if something is not done, you know immediately who's responsible. And then kind of similarly along that vein, don't expect everyone to think exactly the way you do when it comes to cleaning. Everyone has different habits. Make sure to communicate your expectations for cleaning the flat clearly, so that you can make sure that everyone is on the same page about doing something, rather than just assuming that it's common sense, because not everything is common sense to everyone, and also common sense is not that common. And now the next section I want to talk about is taking care of yourself and your mental health. So this one is a really important one, and I would 100% recommend listening to this one. So yeah. Okay, so when you get to uni, you're living alone for the first time, you've got a lot of free time, and then you've got a lot of work, and basically you want to prevent yourself from getting overwhelmed. You want to prevent a problem before a problem arises. So looking after yourself and your mental health are super important in terms of protecting your peace, basically. So the first thing I would say is to recognize the signs of burnout. So if you're constantly tired, irritable, or can't focus, those might be early signs of burnout, an indication for you to take action. Don't wait for a total crash. Don't wait for like a complete mentally leave. Don't wait for everything to go wrong before you address that you might be a bit burnt out or you might be a bit tired. And in that same vein, I say rest before you need to. Don't treat rest like a reward or something that you earn later, but build in small recovery moments, not just when you're studying, but just in general. Build in recovery moments throughout your week so that it prevents a massive crash on a Saturday or a massive crash during the week that you feel that you can't recover from. So the next thing I want to talk about is setting boundaries and saying no. Those things can tend to make people feel really guilty, and I understand why, but also you have to remember that like you have limited time and limited energy and you need to protect that. So use your time and your energy very intentionally and don't give too much of yourself to things that are draining you or making you tired, because it's not going to be sustainable in the long run. Then the second thing I would say is to learn to say no without over explaining yourself. You're allowed to say no to events, favors, or responsibilities without feeling guilty, and obviously don't say yes and then say no. Either say no or say maybe and then say no. Obviously there will be scenarios in which you say yes and then you have to say no, and that is okay, but it's about not making that the norm, making the norm being preemptive rather than reactive. The next thing that I would say is listen to your body. Don't skip meals or sleep to get things done. Regularly skipping food or pulling all-nighters will cause more problems than it solves, because you lose energy, focus, and motivation when you're in the library at 3 a.m. and there's no one else in the library, and that can backfire, especially if you feel like you work best when there are other people working there too. So yeah, and then move your body every single day, even if it's just briefly. Whether it's just a walk, the walk to your lectures is fine. A stretch or a dance break can make the difference, and they help with stress, focus, and obviously just protecting your general well-being. Moving your body is a great way to bring up your mood, release some good endorphins, etc, etc. So yeah. The next thing I would say is accessing support services. Now, this is really important to know where support is available, because you don't want to have to look for either like physically or like digitally. You don't want to have to look for the contacts for or the location for mental health services when you're in the middle of like a crisis. It makes more sense to know where these sorts of things are, where these sorts of resources can be found before you have a problem. That way, if you have a problem, you know where to look immediately, and it takes away that stress, that added stress of trying to find resources. Counselling, peer groups, and wellbeing workshops are there for kind of prevention, as you want to be preemptive about looking after your mental health, especially at uni when there's homesickness, there's so much workload, there's like just a weird transition that you have to do. And so yeah, use those things to support you if you feel that that is necessary, but also especially know where they are. And then the final part of looking after yourself and your mental health is making time for yourself. Yeah, you heard it right. Just me, myself, and I. You, yourself, and I don't know what the possessive pronoun equivalent to. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is you need to make time for just you. Schedule your downtime the way that you would classes. Treat rest and fun as non-negotiables and put them in your planner the way you would a lecture, because you're more likely to stick to them that way. So for example, in like a week, I often have maybe a chunk of reading time, or like a chunk of like time in a free day where I actually just do nothing. Usually that do nothing is scrolling TikTok. Scrolling TikTok is a break, but also take a real break and probably go outside and touch grass or something of that nature. And then yeah, unplug from time to time, because social media can really drain you without realizing. Logging off even for a few hours can help you clear your head. I have definitely had a couple of like log off sessions during uni, and you think, oh Andrew, you're creating content, how do you manage to log off? And it's usually just a case of either just disappearing for a few days or saying, oh, I'm just taking a short social media break, be back in XYZ amount of days, although I don't normally do that, but yeah. These next few subtopics aren't really related in any way. They're kind of just there for more because I wasn't sure where else to put them. So the first thing I would say is staying safe at uni. Share your location at night, especially if you're heading out late at night by yourself, preferably with someone who lives close by. For example, I have my location on for like 3 of my uni friends who all live sort of close-ish to me. Having someone who has your location or knows where you're going, knows when you're going to be back at a certain time is really, really important. It's not overcautious to kind of do check-ins, make sure, hey, have you got to XYZ safely? Hey, did you get home safely? It's better that you do those check-ins and you immediately know if something's wrong. That person immediately knows if something is wrong, God forbid, than you don't have anyone to check up on you and then the worst happens and you don't have anyone who knows where you are. So keep emergency information in your phone. So save your emergency contacts, allergies, medications, and student ID number somewhere that's easy to access just in case. So I think Apple has a feature that you can put things in your medical ID that make it really easy for someone to access if something were to happen to you. So if you have an iPhone, I would recommend doing that. I don't know if any other like Android or like Google Pixel, that sort of stuff, have like a similar feature. I would assume that they do, but if not, just have something that's easy to access on your phone just in case. And then finally, for staying safe, I have trust your gut. Your instincts are there for a reason. So if something or someone doesn't feel right, get out. Just don't ignore it. You can leave, you can call a friend, and you can get some help, but just don't ignore your instincts, because your instincts are usually correct in some form or another. So yeah. The next topic I want to talk about is academic integrity. So obviously academic integrity is really, really important. You need to take it very, very, very seriously. So just make sure that you're adhering to your academic integrity guidelines, etc, etc. So a few things just to note on that. Understand what counts as plagiarism, because it's not just copy and pasting anymore, because misquoting, incorrect paraphrasing, or forgetting citations can potentially still count towards plagiarism and can flag your work and potentially get you in trouble. So if you're unsure, just ask, but in worst case scenario, cite everything. There is no such thing as over citation. There is, however, a thing called under citation. You are better off over citing everything that comes out of your essay that was not an original thought, than you are leaving citations out and then getting in trouble potentially because of that. And onto the kind of thing of citation, use referencing tools and also ask for help. Tools like Zotero, RefWorks, or even Google Docs has like a citation feature. I quite like to use either the Google Docs citation feature or something called Scribr. Is that how I don't know how you say it. It's like a little red, it's like a little red logo with like a white graduation cap. Scribr is what I think it's called. So Scribr is what I use to cite, and it makes it a little bit easier because it has the main citation types, so you can select how you want to do your citation. Copy a link, usually it will work, and if it doesn't, then you can download whatever it is. If it's like behind a paywall, for example, it might not work. Your department might use different citations that you used to, so make sure that you ask for help if you need anything. That's my overarching thing, is just ask for help, because your lecturers, your module conveners, your tutors, everything, they are there to help you, and so take advantage of that. Make sure that you ask for help with things like citation if needed. It's as simple as popping to office hours or popping your academic tutor an email just to double check, because you're better off double and triple checking that something is done correctly than you are doing it wrong and having to redo it. And then the next thing, and I think probably the most important one in terms of academic integrity, is check and know the rules on AI use. So, I mean, I think that generative AI can be really great. I use generative AI for some of this script to like come up with a subtopics to talk about. So I definitely am not anti-AI. However, some unis will allow ChatGPT or similar tools and some won't. Some will have specific parameters for which you can use it, some won't, etc, etc. You get the point. It's uni specific, but also in a lot of cases it will be department specific. You'll find that certain departments are more lenient about AI use than others, and yeah, so you're best off just checking. Know your department specific or school or whatever you call it, your degree's specific rules about AI and assignments before you start using it, because the last thing you want is to have to rewrite something because you wrote it in AI, which don't write in AI, you're there to think for yourself. But you get what I'm saying. And then the next topic I want to talk about is careers and networking. So start a LinkedIn. That is so important for networking. I think I'm connected to so many people on LinkedIn now that like are just in specialists in areas that I would love to pursue or know more about in speech and language therapy, and or companies that I want to work for. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's really great to have all those things on like LinkedIn, and it's a good way to kind of professionally keep up with what's going in other people's lives, you know, what jobs, what things other people are doing, and then, you know, you can draw from those experiences and you can look at maybe, I don't know, maybe a fourth year in your course. Let's say your course is 4 years like mine. Maybe a fourth year has posted about something that they've done that they maybe started doing in third year, and then if you're going into third year, you can have a little think about how you can obtain a similar experience. I had a conversation with a girl who did like a massive research project as part of something she did during second and third year, and so it was really insightful to kind of get an idea of how I can maybe access a similar opportunity when I get to that point. So yeah, and then yeah, so use your uni's career services, because most career services will help you with CVs, interview prep, finding part-time jobs and networking events, and they will also usually hold like industry or professional events that you can go to as well that you might find of interest. I've not been to that many guest lecturers, but I've like wanted to. It's just been like a case of clashing with my actual lectures rather than not going. But yeah, and then connect with your lecturers, but also any industry events that your uni holds, especially if it's an area of interest for you. Go and speak to whoever's hosting that event, because guaranteed they'll have more people that they can put you in contact with, or perhaps they'll even have time to sit down and talk more with you themselves, depending on that person and the busyness of their schedule. Like I said, connecting with LinkedIn, but also asking questions after class and attending any extra events can be really great for networking, because at the end of the day, your like module convener, your placement practitioners, anything like that, any sort of person who oversees something that you're studying can be really great points of contact when it comes to things like references later down the line, especially if you stand out in their mind as, oh, this is this student, this is the excellent work that they've done in this setting or whatever. You're more likely to then be able to get positive references if you're connecting with your lecturers off the bat. And then the final two things I want to talk about, so embracing the experience. Say yes to new opportunities. Try new experiences, meet new people, and join new societies, clubs, do things unexpected, but also don't push yourself beyond what feels okay for you. I feel like I touched on this kind of within Freshers Week, but this really is a blanket rule that goes for the entire of uni. So yeah, and then also, as Taylor Swift said best, in this moment now, capture it, remember it. Capture all the memories that you can, whether it's by taking photos, by vlogging like I did, journaling, just soaking in the moment a little bit longer, because uni feels long when you're doing it, but I literally find it absolutely insane that I finished first year. That snuck up on me. I did not see it coming at all. And so yeah, and I look back at all the memories and all the pictures and all the photos, and I'm just so glad that I was creating content, and that meant that I document everything. And now you don't have to start creating content in order to document everything. You can just document it. But like, I love that, like my YouTube, and like obviously my YouTube only started posting recently, but the things I'm posting are from last year. And then like my YouTube, my Instagram, my TikTok are kind of like a little digital diary of what's going on in my life, and it's so like cute to look back on, even just like the stuff from this time last year. So yeah, I would definitely say I'm a big advocate for capturing the memories. However you want to do that is completely up to you. I think I'm going to make a first year scrapbook of like all the pictures that I took in first year, because there are so many of them. But yeah. Then final, just little pieces of advice that don't slot anywhere else, which is really annoying, but yeah. Other useful tips include check your emails regularly, because you might miss event invites, deadline changes, or perhaps important announcements if you don't. Couple that with checking announcements on your course portal is really, really important. Set a regular time to check them, maybe once a day or at the end of the week. I find I go through once a day, so I'm usually at inbox 0 at any given point in a day, and then if I get an email, I normally just check it now. If you're trying to create a regular habit, I would say set a time of the day, maybe once a day in the morning, once a day in the evening, or like once on a Sunday, or do you know what I mean? Find a regular time that works for you, because now, for example, my uni email is at inbox 0, which means if I get an email that comes in, I can check it straight away. But at the start of the year, it wasn't like that, because I was getting a lot of emails at the start of the year. So it just meant that I would set a day to check my emails. Set a time of the day to check my emails and check it once a day, basically. And then the last piece of advice before I move on to SLT specific advice would be to not compare yourself to everyone else. It's really easy to feel behind when you see, especially on social media, that someone has a lot of friends, top marks, or fantasy placements, or anything else like that. But remember, everyone's path is different. You have got this far and you are absolutely going to smash it. Before I give you my final thoughts, I'm just going to go through a little bit of the SLT specific advice, tips and tricks. So if you're not an SLT student, feel free to skip this. If you're curious about being an SLT student, feel free to listen. And if you are an SLT student or you're about to be an SLT student, then I would highly, highly recommend listening to this section. First things, going on placement. So treat your placement like it's a job. Arrive prepared and on time, dress professionally, and communicate clearly. This is all real world practice to build trust and confidence for you to feel confident going into a clinical setting and interacting with clients and interacting with patients. So it is all there for your benefit, and you can potentially meet some really, really interesting people who are doing really interesting things in the field that you want to go into. So I would definitely say that be very on the ball when it comes to placement. The second thing I would say is keep a journal or a log of your clinical experiences. You'll find that writing notes during sessions and reflecting after each session will help with learning, assessments, portfolios, and also help you to remember any things that you did well, small wins over time, because sometimes it can be quite easy to find placement very mundane. But if you look at, for example, when I went on my adult placement in the hospital, I was like, I did an IDSI drink thickening thing, and I thought that was really, really cool. And so that was a small win, because I got to do that opportunity because I asked to do that opportunity. So definitely ask to do things. Worst case scenario, they're going to say no, or they're going to give you a reason as to why you can't do something. But asking to participate in every single opportunity will get you the most out of your clinical experience. And then I would say, I've kind of already touched on batch cooking before, but batch cook simple lunches and or dinners, because it's especially important when you've got placement where you might not have energy. If you're getting up early in the morning or you're getting home quite late, you might not have the energy to cook lunch and dinner every single day. So what I tend to do is at the start of the week, I will make the base for my salad and then assemble it in the morning when I'm packing my lunch. So that's been really, really helpful. And then I will normally have frozen food that I will bring out of the freezer for dinner. So definitely find a system that works for you in terms of cooking and making sure you're eating well while you're on placement. So the next thing is kind of a work-life balance while being on placement. So try and plan your week around placement, because placement fatigue is real. Placement days can be very mentally and physically draining, so try not to stack extra commitments on those days and try and protect your recovery time. I would say, especially if you go on placement on a Tuesday, have either protected time on Tuesday evening or Wednesday to recover from placement, but also to kind of recap mentally, to reflect on anything. That all kind of goes into recovery time, but low energy reflection tasks, because especially if you're doing a full work day. So if you're in a school, you might be doing a full school day and that might be a little bit easier, but if you're in a clinic or a hospital, you might be doing a full work day, which is typically 8 to 5 or 9 to 5. So you want to be able to rest and recuperate and make sure that you're taking time for yourself. And so kind of along the same vein is don't overcommit during placement blocks. You'll find that you won't have the same energy especially for socials, part-time jobs and heavy academic work. So be careful about what else you're taking on. If that's something that's concerning you, speak to someone who's in a year above about how they've managed their like work-life balance while being on placement, and you'll find that you'll get a lot of helpful tips from them, especially if, for example, maybe that person is on a committee for a society and you're going to be on a committee for a society going into second year, or like, do you know what I mean? Just find people who can give you advice that relates to you, especially about the workload and what they're doing and what they're taking on. So yeah. Next thing is to learn outside of your course. So follow SLT podcasts, YouTube channels. You can follow vlog channels. Marie Muratala, I don't know how to say her name. Marie Murataya is a really, really good one. She is based in America, but she's a really, really good vlog channel to watch to get a kind of an insight into what a day as an SLT might look like later down the line. And I'm trying to vlog more days in the life as an SLT student. So if that's something you fancy, then definitely subscribe and follow along for more kind of days in the life, or like mornings in the life, especially on placement days. And then also educational channels, like I said, podcasts as well. Those are easy ways to stay engaged outside of lectures. Engage with the RCSLT resources, you know, just engage with resources outside of your textbooks and your lectures, because you'll find that hearing real clinicians talk about real clinical scenarios will help build confidence, and it helps you understand the jargon a bit better as well, because dysphagia and dysphagia, they sound the same, and so if you aren't familiar with the term, they do sound the same, and so kind of familiarizing yourself with those sorts of words is really, really important. I'll kind of touch on jargon in a second, but yeah. And then attend CPD events or do some shadowing if you can. Make sure that if you are attending CPD, they are at the appropriate level for you. But attending CPD events is a really, really great way to learn a little bit more about topics of interest. So hopefully I'm going to do a colourful semantics course sometime soon, because that one is kind of a little bit more general and a little bit less specific to SLT. But obviously colourful semantics is an SLT technique, so it is specific to SLT in some ways. But yeah, so whether it's webinars, guest speakers at uni, like I've mentioned before, but also things like sign language. I'm learning sign language at the moment because that's something that might be beneficial to me in a clinical setting later down the line. Not only can these deepen your understanding, especially shadowing a specialist in an area that you are maybe interested in as well, these can deepen your understanding of your course and give you a more holistic approach to SLT rather than kind of specific, because I feel like when we study it in modules, yes, it does make sense obviously to study phonetics and linguistics and linguistics. Sometimes it does make it hard to see the overall picture of what you're trying to put together. So attending CPD and shadowing can deepen your understanding, can give you a more holistic overview of SLT, and it can also look really, really great on your CV, which is always an added bonus with these types of things. So yeah, this is the final section of SLT advice. This is just kind of other really little things. So learn your jargon early and maybe keep a glossary if that might help you. So knowing the meaning of terms like dysphagia and pragmatic language can make you feel more confident in clinics using them in the correct context and clinical settings. It will make you sound more well-read when you're talking to people like your placement coordinators. If you say, oh, is patient X or is client X, patient X, dealing with this type of dysphagia? And they say yes. Or they might say, oh no, actually it's a different type of dysphagia. And that's a learning point for you, because using those words in clinical settings will familiarize you with the correct way to use them, but also provide learning opportunities if maybe you get it wrong. Like, don't be afraid of getting things wrong, because the worst thing is your like placement educator is gonna say, oh, this isn't actually quite what you thought it is. I would recommend some research to go back and look at it, or do you know what I mean? Like, there isn't a negative to getting it wrong. The only thing that it might be a tiny little bit embarrassing at the time, but it's not anything to be embarrassed about, because we all get things wrong. Even people who've been practicing SLTs for 30 years probably get the occasional thing slightly wrong. So don't worry about getting things wrong. Worry about how you can learn from mistakes. Does that make sense? Because your placement coordinators are never going to let you run with a mistake. They will correct you, but they will also provide ways for you to learn from that correction. And then kind of on the same topic of placement educators, build strong supervisor relationships. So that's your academic tutor, I would say, your module conveners, your lecturers, and your placement coordinators. Your placement coordinators, supervisors, whatever the word you want to use, can become mentors, especially if they're in an area that you really, really enjoy. And they also can become people who can write references for you in the future, especially if you've particularly stood out to them, or you return to that placement setting because of how much you enjoyed it. They will definitely remember you then. So be proactive, ask questions, and show genuine interest. And so not every single placement you go on is going to be the most interesting thing to you, but remember that actually there are so many facets to speech and language therapy that it's impossible to I think it's possible to enjoy every single one, but you will have preferences. For example, I really love the pediatric side of speech and language, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to switch off and show no interest when I get to my adult placement, because not only does that look unprofessional, but I am kind of setting a barrier between myself and a learning opportunity where I can actually learn about an area of SLT that I end up really liking and really, really enjoying. So yeah, finally, my final piece of advice is to reflect often. It's a big part of the job anyway, so clinical reflection is a key SLT skill. Make it a habit now, because it will help you grow, track your process, meet assessment criteria, and formulate your portfolio. Your portfolio is like 90% reflection, so if you're already getting in the habit of reflecting every time you have a clinical experience, or every time you have a experience that you would be expected to include in your portfolio, it makes it a lot easier when you're actually formulating your portfolio to write those things down if you've already kind of gotten a list of, oh, what went well, even better if, that sort of thing. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, now for the final kind of section of this video. This is my final thoughts and encouragement. So you're going into first year, like, congratulations, you've made it this far. So first thing, it is okay to struggle. Not having it all figured out is completely normal. I did not have it figured out at all during uni, to be honest. Everyone adjusts at their own pace, and feeling overwhelmed doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. The second thing is that growth takes time. University is about learning who you are as much as it is about the academic and the degree side of it. So friendship, confidence, routines, and success all take time to build, so be patient with yourself. Number 3, you are capable of so much more than you think. You've already done something so huge by getting into university, so well done, congratulations. But also trust your instincts and remember that actually the small wins count. You are capable of so much, and like, I'm certainly here cheering you on in your uni journey. So yeah. The next thing, don't be afraid to ask for help. Asking for help doesn't make you look weak. It shows that you understand your limits and that you're confident enough to ask for help. So yeah, uni isn't meant to be done alone. So whether it's academic support, mental health services, or just a chat with a tutor or a friend, help is there. Use it. Use it. That is probably one of my biggest pieces of advice, would be to use all the help that you are offered. Number 5, make it your own experience. There is no right way to do university. Everyone's uni experience is different, so embrace your version of the uni experience. I know that people have this like categorical idea of what the uni experience is, but make it your own. It doesn't have to be that. It can be that, but it doesn't have to be. It can be something completely and totally different. It can be anything that you want it to be, because these next 3 or 4 years are your 3 or 4 years. They are nobody else's, which means that it's your uni experience and nobody else's, and you should treat it as such and embrace your version of whatever that might look like. So yeah, congratulations again. Congratulations on getting this far, getting into university. I know that part, especially if you did A-levels, was really grueling and really tricky. So you are doing such a fabulous job. You have got this. You are allowed to fail, reset, and try again, and that is okay. So yeah, this is the end of this video. I really hope that you've gotten a little bit of advice or gleaned a little bit of information from everything that I've shared today. If you're a current university student or a past university student, comment below some pieces of advice you'd give. And if you are going into first year and you've got any questions about anything that I might have missed in this video, feel free to comment or DM me and I will get back to those as soon as possible. Yeah, so like and subscribe for more uni content. I'm going to be vlogging a lot when I get back for second year, especially because I'm going on placements. So if you're an SLT student, definitely look out for that. But yeah, I hope that you have got even just one thing from this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you've got this far, comment down a little flower so that I know that you are one of the real ones who watched the video all the way until the end. Hope you have a great rest of your day and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!